So this is an important conversation, and that's what I want to do. I'll spend a little bit of time just kind of putting into context the time that we're in right now. But then this is really, as Congressman Fong said, this is really the start of a conversation. Civ Mill, thank you so much for really pulling this all together. This is a very, as Congressman Fong said, as Assemblyman Tom Lackey said, this is an incredibly important conversation to have. This is a time of consequence that we're living in. This is probably the decisive decade of all of our lives that we're living through. So Civ Mill, thank you for organizing this. Antelope Valley Community College, thank you. This is just a beautiful venue, and I can't think of a better place to have a conversation about the community and about community readiness than our premier community college here. So thank you, Antelope Valley Community College. And I don't know if she's still in the back or if she's already escaped, but Airman Sampang, wow, again, amazing. Oh, there she is in the back. So this is the second time that I've heard her do that, and I've heard the national anthem many, many, many times in the course of 30 years of wearing the uniform, and the top two are both the ones that she has sung. So brilliant, brilliant job. Congressman Fong, thank you so much for being here. This is as you underscored, an important conversation. And Assemblyman Lackey, this is, as you said, a federal, state, and local conversation. It's a very important one. So that's Edwards Air Force Base right there. We couldn't do what we do without this. And I wish I'd zoomed out a little bit further on this photo so that we could have captured Bakersfield and all of Congressman Fong's district. But this really is, the Aerospace Valley is incredibly important. If you go to the next slide for me, please. We couldn't do what we are doing up at Edwards Air Force Base without the community. The vast majority of our folks live in the Antelope Valley. We are partnered together. That photo that we had before just shows how tightly coupled that we are. And the picture that I'm going to paint for you, the context that I want to put the time of consequence that we're currently living in, we play a very important role. We always have. So we are preventing World War III with the B-21. It's actually very easy. My job is incredibly easy. Part of my role is Chief Stoltz and I is to motivate the workforce to come to work, but they know that they're working on this in order to prevent the next war, deter the next war, or if worse comes to worse and it happens, that we have the capability that we need to prevail in that war. But hopefully we don't get there. It's worth taking a little bit tour before we dive in. So go ahead and go to the next slide for me, please. So here's Edwards. And let's zoom out. Go ahead and go next. We're going to take a little tour. It turns out that the People's Republic of China also has an Edwards Air Force Base. It is also in a desert. Ours is in the Mojave Desert, our little corner of the Mojave Desert. If we go over to the Gobi Desert and zoom in, Dingjin Airfield is China's version of Edwards. I am proud to say we have more runways. Our airfield is the biggest airfield in the world. But the People's Republic of China, the People's Liberation Army, and the Chinese Communist Party they are modernizing and growing at a staggering pace. But they're doing more than just that. They're actually actively preparing for something. So go ahead and build for me. So there on Dingjin Airfield, there's this interesting little structure right here. You're like, okay, that looks like a target or whatever. Go ahead and build for me. That is actually Taichung International Airport in Taiwan, in the northwest corner of Taiwan. They have a model, 1-for-1 scale model of the international on Taiwan. It's kind of clear what their intent is. Let's zoom out a little bit further. So go ahead and build for me. So if we were to go from Dingjin Airfield and then go a couple hundred miles to the west, deeper into the Gobi Desert. So this is kind of like us going over to Nevada, to the Nevada Test and Training Range, and zooming in there and taking a look at what targets do they put out there in the Gobi Desert. Oh, there's a target. That's interesting. Go ahead and build for me. Next slide. There we go. So that is the a silhouette of the one-for-one silhouette of the Ford-class aircraft carrier. It's kind of clear what their target is. Go ahead and build for me. Next slide. We'll zoom out again. There's a frigate. These are our railroad tracks. There's another carrier. The railroad tracks curve around the desert. Those are evasive maneuvers that the ships would take as the ballistic missiles, DF-17s and other missiles, are coming in from above. So they have a range that actively targets our ability to project power into the Pacific. Go ahead and build one more time for me, because there's more. This little range there is just filled with targets. There's a destroyer. And so it's pretty clear what China's intent is. So not only are they modernizing and increasing the size of the People's Liberation Army at a staggering pace, but they're not trying to hide the fact of what they're doing. The next slide. And so President Washington, in 1790, at the very first, what we now call the State of the Union Address, this is the very first one in New York. This is before Washington, D.C. was built. Go ahead and build. And in that very first annual message to Congress, President Washington made a case for a standing army. If you want peace, prepare for war. This is an adage that goes back to the Roman Republic, and it's probably even older than that. You know, from the day when we had caves that we defended with stones, we probably said, hey, if we want peace, if we don't want that rival, cave clan to come, we should probably have a pile of stones at the ready. If you want peace, prepare for war, and that's what we do. We do want peace. Next slide. Eisenhower also made that case. So Eisenhower was a general in World War II and lived through the devastation of World War. And he recognized that, we really don't want that. And so he was the president, and despite the fact that he was concerned from 52 to 1960, despite the fact that he was concerned about the military-industrial complex, he oversaw, go to the next slide, of the buildup. The only way to win the next war is to prevent it from happening in the first place. And that's why the technology, the capability that we are developing towards, that this community, the Aerospace Valley here is a part of, is so important, is because we are trying to prevent World War III from happening. The reason this is a decisive decade, and probably the decisive decade of our lives, and most of us grew up in the Cold War, this is even probably more significant, and I can remember how significant the Cold War seemed. Chairman Xi, he likes to call himself president, but he was not elected. He is the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party. So I insist on calling him Chairman Xi and not President Xi, as he wants to legitimize himself with that title. So Chairman Xi is actively pushing back against the international rules-based order that has kept the relative peace, despite the threat of the Cold War, kept the peace, the relative peace and prosperity of the global world order since the end of World War II. And Chairman Xi, in his mind, the West is in long-term decline, and China is in ascendancy, and it now is the decade, in Chairman Xi's mind, when China will realize its 6,000-year rightful legacy to be the sole dominant power of the world and write the rules-based order on its terms. In its mind, after World War II, the international rules-based order that exists, those rules were written by the West, in Chairman Xi's mind, to our own advantage. And they're designed to keep China in this box. And that is by no means the case, but that's how he sees the world. And he has aggressively created a force to be able to insist on their way of seeing the world. And we're trying to deter that and counter that. So You know, here's the era where Eisenhower was the president. If you want peace, prepare for war. You know, relatively peaceful, great, prosperous time. Brezhnev came in to power of the Soviet Union here, and that's where you really start to see the vast buildup, great expansion of the Soviet Union's armed capability, military capability, through the 70s and 80s to the peak in the late 80s where we finally prevailed at the end. This is not a direct parallel to what we're living through right now. The scale of growth of the People's Liberation Army exceeds what the Soviet Union did and the Warsaw Pact did during the Cold War. But there's rough parallels there, and how do we successfully navigate that? Go to the next slide for me, please. So if we look at this is the report, 1988, on the status of forces. Go to the next slide. Here's a figure from that report, which just shows kind of the order of battle comparison. We were never going to be able to compete with the Warsaw Pact on numbers. Depending on which weapons that you looked at, which category, armed divisions, number of airplanes, et cetera, the Soviets and their Warsaw Pact axis outnumbered us by 2-to-1, 3-to-1, in some cases 8-to-1 on a force ratio. We were not going to compete on numbers. We made a decision in the 1980s, and it happened here in the Aerospace Valley. We made a decision that we were going to compete on technology. Next slide, please. And so we invested, what we now call the second offset, we invested in a series of technological leaps in order to counter the strength in numbers that the Soviets had. So that's where we saw the investment in stealth, in precision navigation, GPS, laser-guided bombs, command and control. All these capabilities were developed here, largely. I mean, they were developed in a lot of places. The vast majority of those efforts and those development efforts happened here in the Aerospace Valley. And this is why the Cold War ended. The Soviets could not keep up with us. And so we successfully navigated. You know, World War III could have been, with nuclear weapons, a nuclear exchange would have been likely civilization ending. And the fact that we're here today is because we successfully navigated the end of the Cold War. The difference now is we, in the 1980s, as we ended the Cold War, we had a technological advantage over the Soviet Union. The Soviets did not have this. We no longer call the People's Liberation Army, we no longer call them a near-peer adversary. They are a peer adversary. Next slide, please. And so if we look at what has happened since the end of the Cold War, there's really been three epochs of time. You know, so we had the Cold War ended, and then we had this, it was the end of history. There was a book by a Japanese historian, Fukuwama, I think it was his name, I might be butchering his name, the end of history. So there was this unipolar moment where we took the peace dividend. This is the time that I was at the Air Force Academy. The Air Force was downsizing, the armed forces were downsizing because we didn't need it anymore. And it was actually a great momentary time, another period of great growth and prosperity through the 90s. That ended on 9/11. And so we see these three epochs were separated by two culminating events. The Berlin Wall, the end of the Cold War, was one of those culminating events. Another culminating event was 9/11. The world changed on September 11th, 2001. And that's where we entered this period of violent extremism, and we had the global war on terror to counter that violent extremism. That is now over, thankfully, but unfortunately, we are entering this new era of great power competition. We have not had a culminating event that has defined the start of that period of great power competition, at least not yet. And that's the question, is there going to be a culminating event that wakes us up? And that's part of the reason I'm so grateful for the willingness. We have got all the right players here to start to have this discussion with the community, because it could very likely be that the culminating event is here, attacks on our infrastructure that affects everything. Next slide. And so it's worthwhile going back, as we're talking culminating events, just to go back and take a look at a historical culminating event, since we're taking a peek at history. Everybody probably recognizes Pearl Harbor. This is 18 months before Pearl Harbor. Interestingly enough, 18 years prior to that, go ahead and build twice for me. So that's Brigadier General William Billy Mitchell, a staunch early advocate of air power. In 1924, he wrote a report, and you can read what he wrote there. 18 years before Pearl Harbor happened, he predicted Pearl Harbor. He was off by a little bit. He was off by 18 minutes. The actual attack, it was on a Sunday morning. He says the attack's going to happen on a Sunday morning at 7:30 a.m. The first bombs actually dropped and the torpedoes were dropped at 7:48 a.m. on a Sunday morning. He actually got closer with Clark Field in the Philippines, different time zone. He said 10:40, it was actually 10:30. And he did it just based on geography and math. You know, how long do airplanes fly? They want to take off of the carriers, launch from carriers at sunrise. They need to fly. He predicted the targets. We kind of ignored him. He was a bit of a zealot. He was an air power zealot. He was actually court-martialed by the Army. He was ultimately given, it was misreported once as the Congressional Medal of Honor. It wasn't the Medal of Honor, but he did receive very high honors posthumously for kind of his air power advocacy. But we didn't listen to him. Go ahead and get to the next slide. And of course, that's what happened on that Sunday morning in 1942, December 7th, 1942, that day that will live in infamy. And we didn't listen. 18 years prior, he told us, with only 18 minutes of error. If Admiral Hirohito had said, hey, on Sunday morning at 7:30, we're going to bomb Pearl Harbor, we might have listened to Admiral Hirohito. Or actually Admiral Yamamoto. It was the Emperor Hirohito. We might have listened to the Emperor of Hirohito if Hirohito, the Emperor of Japan, had said, we're going to bomb Japan, just so you know. We might have listened. What if Chairman Xi tells us what he's going to do? Would we pay attention? Next slide. So this date of 2027, actually the closer we get to it, the less worried that I am. This date has changed significantly over time. So when Chairman Xi first came to power, first seized power, and he's now rewritten the Constitution. Normally chairmen can only serve for a 10-year term. He has rewritten the Constitution so he can serve as long as he wants to. And his father lived into his 90s, if I'm not mistaken. So Chairman Xi could be around for a long time. And he's also systematically eliminated all of his political opposition in the Chinese Communist Party. So he has a lockhold. And so we don't talk about China as a nation. We talk about the Chinese Communist Party. There's a single authoritarian rule that dictates everything. It's authoritarian dictatorship. And by the Chinese Communist Party, since there is no political opposition, it's pretty much whatever Chairman Xi thinks. So that's why we can talk about what one person thinks. And that's why we're often trying to communicate directly with him. Look, don't start World War III, because we got the B-21. So originally in 2013, he gave the PLA, he says, I want a modern military. And then about the 2019 timeframe, he gave it 2035. And then he moved that date up to 2032. And then he's moved it forward. So he has moved it back in time to give a more aggressive target because he is afraid of an inability. And so that 2027 date is the latest date. And I'm going to show you the growth that China has made towards that 2027, and it is absolutely staggering. So go to the next slide for me, please. So here's the, and it's a bit incorrect historically to talk about a reunification of Taiwan. Except for a brief period of time, Taiwan has been an independent country. It's actually spent more time under Japanese control than it has mainland China control. It was the only reason it came under China. It was actually part of the negotiated treaty at the end of World War II that China got. But then, of course, when China had their revolution, Mao Zedong, and then the nationalist China fell back onto the island of Formosa. So it's not correct to talk about a reunification. That's the language that Chairman Xi wants us to use. It's actually a forced unification. It would be a more proper way to talk about it. But here's the challenge. It's only about 90 miles across the strait here. So there's we don't talk about, normally you have international airspace or international, you have waters, exclusive economic zones out to 200 nautical miles. You got 12 miles off the coast. There's an ADIZ that's typically, out there several hundred miles. You don't have that territory there, so we talk about the median line. And I'll show you the stats of how frequently the People's Liberation Army is violating that line. But here's the challenge, is how do you get all your forces from here over to here? That's why Taichung Airport sits right there. And this is a translation. So this is a screenshot from an internal People's Liberation Army plan. And you can see all these ports here. That's part of the challenge. There's only 5 deep water ports on the island of Taiwan. Of course, they're heavily defended, which is a good idea, right? If you want peace, prepare for war. But China's got a plan for that. Next slide. So you don't need a deep water port. So this is a new satellite imagery from just a couple weeks ago. These are relocatable piers. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So these are each independent ships, these little gantry things here. So you can actually sail across the 90 miles. You link them up, and you can go about a mile out into open water. So you actually don't need a deep water port. And you just bring up a roll-on, roll-off, and tanks just roll right off there onto the beach wherever you want. They're actively doing this right now in plain sight. Next slide. This is their shipbuilding capacity. They have 200, there's dozens state-owned shipyards in China. We have 4. They have 230 times the capacity. Just one shipyard in China last year alone, in 2024, built more tonnage of ships than the US did since the end of World War II. In 1 year, they built more ships than we have built by tonnage, which is what matters, than we built since the end of World War II. Next slide. And they're not just, we used to count, well, it's just cheap China technology. We've got that technological advantage like we had over the Soviets. It's not. China is now a modern force. This is a stealth frigate. They just commissioned this ship in January. This is a frigate. It's designed for anti-submarine warfare. So that's one of the advantages that we still have over the People's Liberation Army Navy, is our submarine technology. Unfortunately, the Straits of Taiwan are very, very shallow. Pretty easy to find submarines. And if you want to go after submarines, this is how you do it. These are stealth frigates specifically designed for area denial anti-submarine warfare. Very, very modern. Next slide. And they have the capacity to build lots of these. And so this was the order of battle in the Pacific. We're April now, so this was 2 years ago. This was in March of 23. And already you can see, just a comparison. These are not all of our forces. This is just our forces across the Air Force and Navy that are deployed to the Indo-PACOM theater. So this is what is underneath the PACOM commander. But we are vastly outnumbered by the People's Liberation Army. Next slide. This is what is projected, the intelligence, unclassified intelligence prediction for 2027. So go ahead and, Mary, go back for me, and then go forward, and do it one more time. And forward. There we go. And the important thing is that these are 5th gen. So these Type 055, these are stealth destroyers. Those are what are designed to go out and protect the aircraft carriers now. So the J-35 is a stealth, 5th gen stealth carrier capable fighter that the People's Liberation Army has. Advanced submarines, hypersonic missiles. This force is specifically designed to counter our strengths. And for them to be, for Chairman Xi, when he says, well, now's the time, and China is going to emerge from 6,000 years of history and exert its dominance, its regional dominance, and then rewrite the world order, it has the capability to do that if it wants to. Next slide. And they're aggressively doing that. So this is the largest naval operation in the Pacific since World War II. Happened last December, over 3 days. It was, the island of Taiwan was completely encircled. There were picket lines set out here by the People's Liberation Army Navy. Normally, so for example, when we do RIMPAC, we announce years in advance, hey, we're about to do RIMPAC, big exercise, coalition, allies, we're all going to partner together, and it's going to happen 3 years from now. We plan for it, everybody knows it's going to happen, people steer out of the way. China just did this without telling the world what it's doing. It could have been the start. In fact, for a while there, it looked like the invasion had started because the Navy just showed up and they surrounded Taiwan. Did they just blockade the island? So that was the largest naval operation, close to 100 Navy ships in coordination. Here are all of the events since 2021, all the operations, to include just last month as well, all these dots right here, again, unannounced until it started. The People's Liberation Army Navy put 3 ships between Australia and New Zealand and started launching live missiles, doing live fire exercises. Now, they did tell Australia when they started firing. They said, hey, oh, by the way, we're going to be out here doing a live fire exercise. Australia had to reroute commercial air traffic that was already in the air to avoid the area. Again, no warning whatsoever. After they got done firing those missiles there, those 3 ships actually then sailed all the way around Australia before they went home. Again, sending a very, very deliberate message. Again, I don't like that. It's not a reunification, it's a forced unification. Next slide. And so if we look at, in the, really, just since 2022, this is the number of incursions, so that, again, that air defense identification zone. So in the case of Taiwan, it's the median line, so 90 miles across. We drew a line right down the middle, and we said, okay, over here, that's the People's Republic of China. Over here, it's the island of Taiwan's. And it's just what they're trying to do is desensitize us from incursions into that. So we're into hundreds. And you can see that China does it in response or provocatively as they see fit. This little decrease right here was right after the election. And then they can ramp back up anytime they want. Next slide. And so this is where I'm going to bring it back to the Aerospace Valley. It's real easy to say, okay, well, all right, so that's Taiwan. Even if they're not ethnic Chinese, or there's a different heritage, and they're not quite Chinese, they're still Eastern Asian, and so maybe we should just kind of let that go and not start World War III over the island of Taiwan. 95% of the advanced microchips are built in Taiwanese fabs by TSMC. TSMC is something different that we do up at Edwards. TSMC. 95% of the advanced microchips. Now we're in the process of building some fabs here. We don't have them. So one of the things that we have tried to do as artificial intelligence, again, we're one of those inflection points, a decisive decade for another reason, is we are denying the export controls on advanced microchips to China. Do you think Chairman Xi would have any qualms whatsoever if they took over Taiwan of denying access to those microchips now that they are writing the rules to the US? So it does matter for lots of reasons. China has built at a staggering speed. The rate at which they've built all those ships and built that Navy and built that Air Force, built that rocket force, built the hypersonics missiles, has been staggering. But they do more than that. They are also targeting our critical infrastructure right here. We know that the Chinese have infiltrated our electrical grids. There is Chinese malware on all the SCADA systems that control electric power communications. The first indication that we have that the invasion of Taiwan has started is probably that the lights go out and that the cellular network doesn't work anymore. If it did work and you could still log into your bank account, you might not actually see anything because all the records might be scrambled. It might be confusing. There's a way to actually attack us without attacking us. Next slide. And so just as an indication, it wouldn't be that easy. So if you remember that blackout in 2003 that affected the entire Northeast, and so we're talking about the Eastern Interconnect, there's 3 different regions. When you put current down wires, they tend to sag. So during the summertime when the wind's not blowing, the electrical wires can sag. And if it turns out that there's trees there and they sag into a tree, you can actually short out a line. So that actually happened in Ohio. This little line going up to Cleveland sagged into the line, so that one came off, was kicked offline because it shorted out. Not a big deal, pretty resilient, right? But then the next one sagged because it was carrying more current. It kicked offline, so now more current is flowing this way. That one sagged, that one sagged. Now all of this power is flowing just from there. That actually sets off a chain reaction of reactive power being out of sync with the rest of the grid and leads to a rapid domino effect of the entire grid going down. It's fairly balanced, finely balanced all the time. And if you disrupt it, the entire system can collapse. And that's exactly what happened. Ultimately, 55 million people lost power. 100 people died during this from the power loss, and it was only for a couple hours. Think about if the electrical grid goes down for 6 months, because that could happen. Now, the system's not as fragile as it was in 2003, but that was a tree. That was just a natural, warm summer day. Everybody turned their air conditioners on. The line's going. Now, we don't have a lot of trees around here, but there is Chinese malware in the SCADA systems on our grid. They are in all of our critical infrastructure. Next slide. So China has more cyber operators than the rest of the world combined. There was an article in The Economist last week, Tracking the Hacking, is what it's titled, that overviews all of the operations that China's done everywhere that they are, and by a person for person. In fact, earlier, it was actually at the start of March, we're now in April, but we just indicted 12 named People's Liberation Army cyber operators. We indicted them in federal court. Now, of course, they're living in China, so unless they ever come here, we're probably never actually going to. But we've identified them. Go ahead and build for me. So this is a list since 2024 of all the cyber attacks, named cyber attacks, known cyber attacks from China, originating from China. The designation that we use, typhoons are attacks that originate from China. Dust storms are ones that come from Iran. Blizzards are cyber operations that start from Russia. These are the named operations. Go ahead and build for me, and I'll mention just a couple of them. So Volt Typhoon, we've known about since 2019, 2020 timeframe. This is Chinese malware in all of our critical infrastructure: water, electrical, communications, oil, air traffic control. They're in the SCADA systems. We know that they're there. We can't actually get them out. So that's Volt Typhoon. We've known about that one for several years now. What just emerged late last fall, Salt Typhoon. Salt Typhoon, we know it's been going on since 2021. This is 9 different US telecoms companies have been acknowledged that the Chinese have gotten access to their servers and have complete phone records of all of the phone calls from those telecommunications, to include my government phone, to include when he was candidate for president, candidate Trump, Mr. Trump. They have all of his records for the last 4 years. Vice President Kamala Harris records they had. The vice presidential candidate at the time, Mr. Vance, they had his phone records. So they know every single person that every government phone, as well as everybody else's, has had. That is deeply concerning, particularly as you look, just how often we are using messaging apps and other types of things. there's concern about if they're CIA operatives and who have they called and who have they called in China, and so maybe that we've just uncovered human. So that is Salt Typhoon, and we still can't kick them out. We know that there's 9 telecommunications companies that are affected. We know that they're still in the system. Once you have admin privileges, it's very, very easy to hide. This is what is known as advanced persistent incursions. And it's something that all those cyber operators in China are very, very adept at doing. The newest one was just named last month, Silk Typhoon. This is China's cyber operations targeting our cloud services. Anybody use Microsoft Teams for anything? Amazon Web Services? All these cloud services that we're becoming reliant on, this is the targeted operations against cloud services. China is doing it. Next slide. And there's a lot of them doing it. Next slide. So I do want to be very, very clear. I've been picking a lot on Chairman Xi, and I think he deserves it. We do not have a beef, though, with the Chinese people, with the people of China. There is a very, very long and rich heritage and cultural history, 6,000 years, probably the oldest continuous civilization on the planet is the Chinese civilization. We have no disagreement with the people of China. They are actually probably suffering just as much under authoritarian dictatorship as we will if Chairman Xi decides now's the time for China to emerge as the sole dominant superpower of the world, and oh, by the way, I got the army to do it if I want to. So again, it's very, very important, I think, as we talk. I try to be very careful, and I think we all should as we're doing this, is that we don't say, China's doing this or the Chinese this or that, because it's not about the Chinese people. I consider ourselves, we're probably on the same side. They probably don't like living underneath authoritarian communist, Chinese Communist Party leadership. It is specifically, we are trying to change Chairman Xi's calculus with what we're doing up at Edwards Air Force Base with the capability that we're developing. And it's also a dire picture. I am actually optimistic still. Next slide, please. There are 2 books. Go ahead and Bill for me. So if you want to read more about kind of just the geopolitical situation that we're in, here's 2. So the one on your left by Brands and Beckley. They are professors at Johns Hopkins University. They are both fellows of the American Enterprise Institute, which is a conservative think tank, apolitical but conservative. The Danger Zone. They paint a no end of scenarios. It's very easy to imagine a series of scenarios that just result in World War III, to include, kind of the attacks on our critical infrastructure here. So this is a war. If this war happens, it's going to happen here. It's going to come to us. We are going to feel the effects. This is not just the people of Taiwan. This is not going to be like us watching the news and seeing what's happening in Ukraine. This is something that's going to happen here, and that's why we're having this conversation. So this one is probably scenario kind of scary. This one is hopeful, optimistic. So Kevin Rudd, he paints a picture of an avoidable war. So Kevin Rudd is the Australian ambassador to the United States right now. He was previously Prime Minister of Australia, and then after that, he was actually Foreign Minister. He studied in China. He's a fluent Mandarin speaker. He knows China very well. He understands Chairman Xi. He's actually written a second book just on Chairman Xi. He also knows the U.S. very well. He has spent time in school here in the United States as well, and has been the ambassador here. So he understands both of these countries. And so the avoidable war is his prognosis on how do we avoid World War III, potentially civilization-ending war between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. Next slide. The other reason that I'm optimistic is because we're actually talking about it right now. So just like those cavemen, even before the Roman Republic, where they were stacking up their stones at the entrance to the cave just in case that other cave clan came by. We are preparing for war right now, and that's part of the conversation that we're going to have here, and that we're going to continue to have. And again, I love the way Congressman Fong said it. and Assemblyman Lackey is like, this is just the first conversation of an ongoing dialogue that we need to have about how do we be ready. Because the more ready that we are, the more likely we are to change Chairman Xi's calculus. If we were an easy pushover, if we weren't prepared at all, it's a whole lot easier if I'm Chairman Xi and I'm going through my calculus of like, oh, do I start World War III or not? If we were an easy pushover, it's much more likely to happen. And so we've got to be strong enough, resilient enough, ready enough, and prepared enough that we change his mind about, is today the day to start World War III? And because, next slide, because we are developing this, which is specifically designed for those very, very long endurance, this is the B-21. This is one of the platforms that we know Chairman Xi is worried about. And guess where it's being built and developed and tested and evaluated? And guess where it's going to be delivered? That capability is going to be delivered to the Air Force is coming from here. The fact that we're ready, the fact that we're doing this is why I am optimistic that we are not going to fight World War III. We are prepared for war. We want peace. We are prepared for war. Next slide. Next slide. And we're in it together. So I have no idea how long I spent talking. This is on the calendar. Or on the schedule. This is like Q&A. This is actually, I want this to be a discussion. We've got the right leaders in the room with the right ideas. I want this to be brainstorming, like, hey, maybe we should go and do this, or maybe we need to do that. Our critical infrastructure is targeted. We know that. That's part of the picture that I wanted to paste. We know. I mean, the very first place. You know, if I was Chairman Xi, and it's time to go, guess where I'm gonna target first. And so, whether you like it or not, you're in this. We're all in this together. So I think we have a microphone. If anybody has things that they want to say, or ideas they want to share, or questions that they want to ask, this is what this portion is for. Yes, sir.
Hold on. Here you go.
Yeah, General. Do we have a plan B if we know our infrastructure is going to be targeted? We know that there's a possibility of either China, a natural disaster, or another earthquake. We're going to be cut off. Yeah. So what kind of plan B do we have in place for power, water, and survival?
Excellent question. And one that I hope all of us are asking ourselves. Like, what is and this is actually, I've painted a picture of what happens when China starts the war, or when Chairman Xi starts the war. See, we got to be careful. We got to police ourselves. Again, we're not picking a fight with the Chinese people. When Chairman Xi starts the war, what is our plan? But it's also that same type of preparedness that we do. It's what happens when the San Andreas Fault decides to do its thing, or wildfires or whatever. So we happen to live in a community where emergency preparedness and disaster preparedness is hand in hand with Chairman Xi being a bad actor type of preparedness. So this is a question. I love the question, and it's the perfect first question because it's the one that I want all of us to ask ourselves. And so I'll share a little bit of insight what we have done up at Edwards as an installation. And some of you were partners in this. So last December we actually did a week-long exercise that exercised exactly this. The war has started. China has attacked our electrical grid. We have persistent communications problems. How are we going to keep the test mission going? Because once the war starts, we know we are going to have joint urgent operational needs. We're going to have capability, rapid reprogramming. There's things that we're going to need to keep the mission going up there. And so how do we fight through that? And so we did that for a week. And then we followed that, and we learned some things, right? I can't reveal the vulnerabilities that we uncovered, but we uncovered things. We're like, ooh, we should probably fix that. Oh, that doesn't work. We should probably fix that. We followed that up with a tabletop exercise with the local community. And so if you were part of the tabletop, I know some of you in here were, go ahead and raise your hand. That we did, there were a couple, yep. So we had City of Lancaster, Palmdale, we had the Kern County Sheriff, we had Southern California Edison, we we had some of the emergency managers from the local community all come, and we sat down around a table and said, okay, we just lived through this for a week, and it was really difficult. Now imagine that it's 6 months into the future. And we talked through a couple different scenarios in terms of like breakdown of civil society, martial law. We would expect that if martial law is declared, it would be Edwards Air Force Base, would be this region, would be the military commander would have, in partnership with the civil governance. How do we do that from a command and control and a law enforcement? So we talked through that and uncovered like, okay, well, we probably need to go figure that out. We don't have a solution, but we started the dialogue. And so I think that's what we need to do. We do have some fortunate things. So, you can see it right there. That is a very, very large solar farm. About 430 megawatts of generating capacity, 980 megawatts of storage capacity. So it's possible that we can actually isolate large portions of this from the rest of the grid that goes down and maybe bring smaller grids back up. But these are the things that we need to think about and think through. Water. Water is one of those things that only, particularly in a very, very hot environment like this, could become critical. But again, that's also one of those things from a disaster preparedness. There's probably a community public service message that we can all help reinforce about just having a couple days supply worth of water available, some food, some staples. By no means do I recommend that everybody turn into a prepper. Is that what they're called? I think. But there's at least a couple days worth of supplies, medication, those types of things are. But that's the conversation. So I love the question, and I wish I had the complete answer for what a Plan B is. There are emergency response type things. So FEMA's there. We have the DoD has a services type of thing, primarily for disaster standpoint. The challenge with all of those types of emergency services is we typically, when we have, say, we have a hurricane or we have wildfires down in LA, they're isolated to that region and the rest of the country can pitch in and help. If this war starts, this is going to affect the entire nation. And so we're going to be kind of probably on our own for a little bit. And so that's why, again, having these conversations, knowing who to call and who to get to and who to talk to is why we're having this conversation right now. Great question. Thank you.
Question here?
Yeah, I do believe China is obviously our long-term threat, but what about our short-term threat like Iran?
Yes, sir.
Iran is an immediate threat right now, and I don't know if you could speak to that at all, but I would like to hear something.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so it's, there's the usual four kind of suspect, and they're not friends. That's one of another reasons I'm optimistic is because our friends are a whole lot better than Chairman Xi's friends. We get Australia, we get Japan, we get England. Chairman Xi gets North Korea. So I will take our friends any day over their friends. But that kind of North Korea, Iran, People's Republic of China, Russia, they are sharing technology. North Korea has troops fighting in Ukraine right now, helping Russia out. So there are more near immediate threats. Assemblyman Lackey, you are exactly right. Iran is a concern. Right now, they don't have their missiles are regional missiles, so our forces that are in the Middle East are threatened by Iranian missiles. The U.S. is not, but guess what? It's pretty easy to put a nuclear warhead, a nuclear bomb in a container, and bring it into a port, and it would be very easy for Iran to do that or North Korea to do that. So those are very real threats. I wish I had a clean answer. Yes, that's part of why we exist. Why we have a strong armed services is to help prevent that. Why we have a strong intelligence community to kind of get those early indicators that, hey, something's happening, and then to prevent it before it happens. We've been fortunate, for the 80 plus years since the end of World War II that, something really, really bad hasn't happened aside from, 9/11, which on the scale of something, kind of some of those other scenarios is much, much smaller in scope and scale.
I have a question here. We'll get to you.
Mr. Winheim.
Sir, thank you so much. I was wondering if you could inform us or advise us what we would see as a local community as far as the base's reaction should the lights go out, of things that you can share. What would we be aware of beforehand so that we can let folks in our areas know that's okay, that's how they're planning to react?
Great question. It's going to be very scenario dependent. One of the challenges with these cyber operations is attributing them. And so there could be some advanced type of things that happen that we actually don't know. The Northeast blackout in 2003. This was before there was, we had the cyber operations that we have now as, the Internet of Things and how everything is connected to everything else. That was a failure. So if there were failures that started happening that just appeared random, what would we know that it was actually something that was going on? Anybody remember the ice storm, 2022 ice storm? Or it wasn't even an ice storm, it was just cold weather in Texas. So there's 3 different grids, 3 different interconnects. There's the Western interconnect, there's the Eastern interconnect, and then there's Texas. I guess Texas is doing that just in case they want to secede someday. Going back to the Lone Star State. But so Texas has its own standalone grid, which actually made it more vulnerable when they had very cold weather, and it upset the balance of power generation, and it took them 2 weeks to bring the grid back up. That was not a cyber operation, but it could be. And so there's also scenarios where there could be something like there could be a window of opportunity, right? Let's say that there was some type of natural disaster or natural thing. It's been a while, but we occasionally have experienced rolling brownouts, right? As electricity demand peaks, and maybe there's a power plant that's offline, and so they have to, in order to control the reactive capacity and the reactive load on the grid, they have to, do some rolling power outages in order to keep the grid stable. So there could be a scenario where there's some like natural type of thing coupled with a couple power plants that are out that we're doing that is like, ooh, there's an opportunity, and we'll take advantage of that. So it'll be difficult. I would expect that what we would do, how our response to actually get to answer your question, is that we would be as transparent and candid with what we know what's going on. If we suspect that there is some nefarious something going behind, and if we would communicate to the community. So if we changed our threat con level, so we are continuously monitoring the installation, and there's a threat condition level, and we would adjust that, modify it, and so that would be announced. Those types of adjustments would be announced through our public affairs in the tower, and the local community would know. Again, hopefully there's some advance notice. In order to mobilize an entire army and move them from mainland China over to Taiwan would take a fairly significant buildup that would be noticeable. And so, not unlike the D-Day Normandy invasion, there were some months of indication that, hey, something's afoot and something's going to happen. And so there would be a steady buildup that I think the local community could feed off of. But we would commit to sharing as much information as we could. But it could also be a surprise, like the morning of December 7th, 1942.
I think my name is Nana, and I'm speaking on behalf of the medical community.
Yes, ma'am.
We all have, as you know, we're Palmdale Regional Medical Center. We do participate with you guys, but one of the things I observed, be it from COVID learning, and I was at the Northridge earthquake in Northridge.
Yes.
And what we learned is that we're very reactive, and then we have subsets, right? So the hospital associations are doing something, the emergency managements are doing something, the hospital's readiness is doing something, but we're very fragmented. You know, it was based on reactivity with COVID that you built the big, outdoor 50-bed hospital at Antelope Valley. But we are, as a group, not connected very well.
Yes.
Like, we do a command center when we have an internal or an external disaster. But if we have a community disaster, I don't know if we're set up properly to handle all of that.
Yep. I share your perspective. One of the things that we have discussed, and I'm very interested, and we have the community leaders here. The next time we do a big exercise, it would be nice to actually do a partnered exercise. So we are running an exercise on base to assess our awareness or readiness, and to involve the local community in some way. We've tried that a couple times, and often we just run into the challenge of, so most recently, I'll share an example. We had a major aircraft incident response. So we had an exercise where we had 2 aircraft that collided, and we had casualties. They were off base, and originally we were going to work with Kern County and Cal City, but it turned out that they had real-world operations going on, and they couldn't spare the staff, and I completely understand that. We run into the same thing, same challenges. But what that would do is expose exactly the problem that you've identified, that the radios that my defenders use aren't necessarily the same frequencies and the same channels that the sheriffs use. Now, they do have ways to communicate with each other, and they routinely, I would say actually probably our law enforcement and our defenders on base probably have. That's probably where we're best right now in terms of like connection and discussion, but they're still not seamless. And that's something that we've also discussed with our defense support for civil authorities, DISCA, is that, again, the DoD is organized to go fight away games. We've never had, except for the Civil War, we've never really had to fight in the American Revolution and momentarily for the War of 1812. So there's 3 examples, but none of them are the 20th century or post. We've never had to fight here. We've always fought away games, and we like that.
But when we do work, when we did the disasters, it was never including the military.
Yes.
Right? So we learned from the Northridge earthquake. So when we had the DWP blow up, and we went all on generators in San Fernando Valley.
Yep.
And we learned that somebody came from emergency management and was speaking on behalf of all of the area. So we did learn, but we're still not growing fast enough.
Yes, I would wholly agree. We have a lot of work left to do, and that's why, again, why I'm so grateful and encouraged that we're having this discussion right now. So, our public affairs is the lead for the wing in Edwards Air Force Base for the community engagement and the community outreach. I am committing Edwards Air Force Base to partnering as much as our local leaders, and we have a lot of the local leaders here, and I suspect everybody here is on board as well. I think the state, would encourage this. It's like, yes, you guys should do that. It's something that I am getting direction from the Department of the Air Force and the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Form strong bonds with your local community. Because you're exactly right. When the disaster happens, when the event happens, that's not the time to meet somebody for the first time. So we are committed, and we'll engage and partner as much as we can, and let's try to figure out where the things are, and then just make every year, every exercise, let's move the football a little bit further down the field and make progress and get better. Wholly agree.
Okay, we have a question over here, and then I will go down to you after this
All right,
question.
and I think I'm getting the signal that those are probably the last 2 that we'll ask. But this is, again, that doesn't mean the conversation is over.
Actually, both of you ran into the question that I had. And the question is not even necessarily for you, sir.
Yes.
I think the question or the thought is for all of us here. 2 points. You and I have talked in the past. Yeah, we have not had conflict on our soil since the Civil War, right. And that was internal. The last time I think we were, shall we say, prepping, I was a kid,
Yep.
having exercises to go under the desk in case, you know, I had neighbors that you know, had a cave under their house just in case. But then there is also, yes, it is this communication. And most of the people upholding the mission at Edwards Air Force Base, vast majority, live outside of the fence. So my question, or the thought that I want to leave everyone with, is how do we build that communication? And how do we, without causing panic,
Right.
but just so that we're getting people to at least think about it, how do we mentally prepare ourselves for the what if? We do a really good job about preparing for earthquakes.
Yep.
How do we now prepare for this? And maybe there's some ideas in here as to who we should include. And I'm going to leave it with one. There is the AV Communicators Network, which might be an interesting place to start.
Thank you. Great. I mean, spot on message. You're exactly right.
Hello, yes, my name is Jackie. Thank you for inviting me to this.
Yes, ma'am.
For almost the last 20 years, I've been actively participating in transmission system design proceedings before the Public Utilities Commission.
Yeah, outstanding.
And I just want to point out and start a conversation on this. The Sanborn project that you talked about on Edwards, the Estrella project, all the projects, the Lancaster projects, they all feed to the Antelope Valley, the Antelope substation. And you don't need a cyber attack to take that down. It could be taken down in 5 minutes for $500, and it'll stay down for at least 6 months because of how long it takes to get a new 500 kV transformer.
Yes, ma'am.
And Edison has very few spares on their system. So I have been trying for over 3 years now to elevate this issue to electeds, to utilities, to the Public Utilities Commission. You can't give too much information because you don't want to give people ideas, obviously. So, and there are solutions. And so I guess I would like to find a way to start engaging some of these groups. And the solutions aren't going to be popular with Edison and other utilities because their bread and butter is transmission systems, and the solution involves non-transmission.
Right.
So I guess I would like to point that out, and because Plant 42, Edwards, all of you are fed by the Antelope substation.
Yep.
And when that goes, and it can be done like that, it's a permanent, or it's 6 months, the war's over by then, who knows. Anyway, so I would like to engage with somebody on that and have that conversation. So thanks.
Yep. Yes, ma'am. That was a great, kind of vignette just to, showcase and highlight exactly the challenge that we face, as well as kind of let's solve this. Let's figure out, let's brainstorm some ideas and let's get after it and solve it. All right, I think we're over to Mr. Winheim for closing us out.
Ladies and gentlemen, how about a big round of applause for General Wickert?